The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Greg Vandergast joins us today. He is an international speaker on why security fails, IT quality, leadership, and strategy, a former hacker, FBI, and DoD operative, author, advisor, CISO, people and culture enthusiast. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Awesome first name, by the way. I had to get in that plug.
I know, we're taking over the world, one Greg at a time.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear about your journey. I mean, that's an awesome LinkedIn profile, by the way, as far as, and there's so much there. How did you get to the point that you're at, and why did you start in cybersecurity?
I started in cybersecurity 25 years ago because my sister brought home a VHS copy of the movie Hackers. And this movie taught me that if I broke into computers, I would sleep with Angelina Jolie. So as an
is that the one with Robert Redford too?
No, you're thinking
that's Sneakers.
Or Sneakers.
What's that?
Sorry,
Sneakers, yeah.
Sneakers is very, very good. No, this is a different one.
Okay.
But yeah, so as an impressionable teenager, I immediately developed an interest in computers and networking. And a year later, I actually broke into a nuclear weapons facility about 3 weeks after they set off 5 atomic bombs on the ground. So it was kind of a big deal in the news and media. And I got some federal-looking suits at my front door.
Okay, so you broke in not as part of doing authorized penetration testing.
No,
this is kind of cool.
16 or just barely 17 at the time, I think. I was barely just turned 17 at the time. I moved to the U.S. not long after that, and I'd only shortly been in the U.S. and some gentlemen from the Defense Department came to the house. They made me a job offer I couldn't refuse. They were quite adamant about the couldn't refuse part. So pretty standard start. And then the FBI joined in, 3 years undercover with the FBI and Defense Department, all kinds of crazy things, a lot of counterintelligence, just who's out there doing what, because this is before none of this stuff was matured. Even some in the field stuff, like some really sophisticated organizations using cybercrime, theft, corporate espionage, aerial surveillance, actual undercover meetings with microphones and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Weird and wacky stuff. Then I spent probably 10 years being your typical kind of IT consultant, putting in a lot of security technologies, firewalls, intrusion detection, encryption, database encryption, that kind of stuff. It was really big at the time. But then I eventually progressed to the point where I was responsible for my own organization. And that's where you see a lot of the culture, leadership, people, because I realized a lot of the tech work that I did, which I was highly sought after and paid very highly for, was actually really low value. It took me a while to figure out, okay, how does this actually piece together, and how we did all this stuff, but we didn't even understand the business process or what we were protecting, any of that. So I kind of went on this long journey, and personally also having kids and everything, the whole wanting to share knowledge and kind of a leadership journey, and how does stuff work, and how does business work, and how does sales work, how does marketing work, how do all these pieces fit together, how do I influence people, and you hear a lot about security people. We need to learn how to influence to get the business to do more of what we want. I think that's the first stage, and then the second stage is you kind of realize, oh yeah, they're actually trying to do a whole bunch of stuff themselves that I also need to understand and contribute to. Mm-hmm. And just kind of understanding all these business processes. And that led me to, I think the whole security industry is a bit fundamentally flawed in that most of what we call security is actually firefighting. If your job is to secure an organization, you're much better off improving the business processes, like every process from the hiring process to how you sign a sale or whatever. Just go through those processes, make sure they have security embedded in them, that where the data is going, where it's housed, that systems are being built and maintained in such a way that they're going to be relatively free of vulnerabilities or easy to maintain if they are. So that's kind of been, I see security as a quality function above anything else. And I see the root cause of everything is ultimately culture, people and culture. And when you say culture and security, people immediately think user awareness. That's not what I mean at all. It's people wanting to work together, do the right thing, enjoying coming to work. And and acting as a team towards a common goal. That's culture to me. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. But how do you convince a business to bake in security on the front end of whatever they do, whatever process, whether they produce widgets or a service or something, because security costs money. I mean, why would they care?
Security costs money, but I'm going to argue doing security retroactively costs way more money. And in some ways, security can actually free up a lot of money. If you think of every security vulnerability as a quality issue, a security vulnerability is effectively a defect. It's a defect in code. It's a defect in the build process. It's a defect in how an organization is structured so that teams don't collaborate, don't see what each other are doing. And that's what results in these vulnerabilities. And one of the analogies I use is, if you have a car factory, you have an assembly line. You've got like 100 stations. You've got 100 small teams of people doing different things leading to an end result. And then at the very end, you have a quality assurance person whose job is just there to make sure everything was done right. Yeah, it's good. It's all bolted together properly, and we roll it off the assembly line and sell it. And when that quality assurance person does find that, the panels are on crooked, there's bolts missing, this isn't working, you forgot to put the fluids in, well, they don't go and top it all up, especially if it's happening to every single car. They go to, okay, well, which station was supposed to bolt in the transmission because it's missing 3 bolts? You go and talk to those people and find out why did that happen, and you solve that problem there, and it doesn't happen anymore. Right. In security, we do that very differently. We hire 10,000 QA people, and we teach them to become mechanics, upholsterers, absolutely everything, and we have them fix all the defects as they come forever. We never actually go and fix the build processes, the business processes. And I even talk to security people who understand this concept, but they tell me, yeah, but that's an IT problem. And I'm like, no, security is the end result we're trying to achieve. It's not just the name of your department. And it's just what you're doing is not the only contributor to security. I think 90% of what we do in security is catching what fell through the cracks, but we should be focusing 90% of effort of there not being any cracks.
Would this then be what you would think would be like the greatest, or I shouldn't say the greatest, but a significant threat for small and mid-sized business information security, not necessarily an external, but an internal on how they do things?
I think, yeah, I would. So, like, for example, well, you see, Jen Westerly in the US, head of, I forget the name of the agency, but you guys have a federal information security agency. One of her agendas is really to put the responsibility on the makers of products and software to secure these things. Because, small businesses and individuals end up using these things, so and it compounds the problem. And small organizations are often, they're not able to hire a security team, because a security team is not just like one person doing security. There's a whole range of disciplines. You need 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 people if you're going to cover all the disciplines of security. Mm-hmm. There's no way a small organization can do that. So if instead you just get your small or medium businesses business processes and tech processes and how you do stuff to work properly, then you have far fewer security issues to work with in the end. Even in large organizations, we have this trend where security teams grow bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think realistically, if you're fixing everything as far upstream as possible, the security team should actually be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Like, your ideal security team is basically one person who advises the business and they do everything securely, and you don't need this big technical security team at the end. Now, it's impossible to do that to a perfect degree, but it's something that scalability works very well for SMBs.
So one example that came to mind, it would seem like, if I were to distill it to make it very simple for a small, mid-sized business, you have information. That information has value. That information presents threat. If you can understand, first of all, where your information is, second of all, then you can control it, you can protect it. But also, if you are holding on to information that you don't need, then why not get rid of it? So these are almost the basic blocking and tackling things that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, like, I work in startups, but I don't really work in like your typical small to medium sized enterprise. But I've seen those situations, and that's a perfect example. Like, why give yourself It's a very simple business process. I don't need this, get rid of it. And you've just saved yourself the effort of having to contain and secure and monitor and log and do all these things with that data. So yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's
Go for the
so
business
hard.
process.
Yeah, and it's so hard to get over the idea, though, of just like, well, we've always done it that way,
Yeah.
and we need to. I don't know how you can sell necessarily if you've got you were talking about people and culture before. How can you effectively move that ship a little bit in a little bit of a different direction? Convince them that, hey, if you don't, we'll stay with the information risk for a moment here. If you don't need that information, get rid of it.
How do you convince them?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a simple financial proposition. It's like, look, do you want to spend $10 now, or do you want to once, or do you want to spend $5 a year for the next forever? And that $5 is going to be 10, 15, 20. It's only going to compound the worse this problem gets. So the sooner you start getting those practices in, you've now established that pipeline. You have a business process or a series of all your business processes that has the correct outcomes that will minimize exposure no matter what you put into that pipeline. And the sooner you do that, the less you're going to have mounting up at the end. This is how even small companies, startups that are 3-4 years old, already have immense amounts of technical debt sometimes, just because they haven't made an initial investment. And you think, oh, we'll worry about it later. But it's like, you're actually within the same funding round, a $20 million funded company will have spent an extra 2 or 3 million just already of stuff they need to manage. That's, it's not a long, it's never as long as the time period as you think it's going to be before. You know what I'm saying? You think that stuff's going to bite you in the butt like 10 years down the line, but it actually starts pinching you much sooner than that. You just don't realize it. And then it just kind of creeps up on you, and it's the way we've always done it. And then it's very difficult to change it.
Now, embedded in that is some very good advice for security folks here. And that is that if you're going to try to move that ship, you have to start from the premise of speaking in terms of the business, not in terms of the technology. How would you help a too technical CISO, for example, understand that?
The first thing I would do, and it's funny because I've had situations where I've been brought into companies, and the best thing I could do for that company was literally just coach and mentor that CISO. Read about marketing, read about sales, get a book about just a pocket MBA type thing, just understanding business, how it works, how those people in those other departments, how the executive think, what they worry about. They really don't care about the number of firewall rules that were triggered.
Exactly.
They care about the EBITDA. How does this look on paper? How can I've managed to turn the security function around where the company was I had a commercial person inside the security team just to do marketing about the security proposition of our brand. And in the UK, where I am, it was a German company. In the UK, 90% of the brand awareness was from security. And we even won some big tenders where they would come to us, and they weren't interested in security, but we made them aware of what we were doing and why, and we're transparent about it. And we did market research about their sector and this and that. And then they went to our competitors and said, well, what are you guys doing? And we have this piece of paper that says that we're certified. It's like, okay, but can we actually see? Do you have this program? Do you have this team structured like those guys and this whole stack of services? No. And we made them realize, actually, we'd rather be with those guys because they seem to really, even just on the security part, they seem to really know what they're doing, which also helps the rest of the business because they assume, well, if the security team really knows what they're doing, probably the rest of the company knows what they're doing as well.
Yes.
And that's actually won us business, even though security was never even part of the original tender.
It comes down to, I think a component could be communication as well, too. If you've got two that are equal, the one that can communicate better is going to be the one who wins. And
absolutely. One of the things I do now is I help security vendors position products with some strategic value. So I'll give you a very simple example. Vulnerability management tool. Oh, it finds which systems haven't been patched, and then you can patch those systems. Versus, oh, it finds systems that haven't been patched, and then you can inquire why they haven't been patched, pull on that thread, see what's maybe wrong with your patching process or infrastructure, and Oh, that's okay, but it's actually your asset management platform or your procurement process that's not tied in together, and you can fix those at the source, and then avoid 500 systems from becoming unpatched because they weren't caught by the automatic process. That's a much bigger value proposition. It's the exact same tool, but you just sold it with a bigger value proposition. It's getting sunny out. I can see it glaring.
Yeah. Well, I think it was almost like that your words had an angelic quality to them.
That's the one. That's the one. But
Well,
I think understanding the language of business. I mean, obviously, interpersonal communication skills, understanding the language of business. But I think you were aiming more at just like basic personal communication. And I've had so many practitioners come to, oh, but I don't report to the CFO. I don't report to the CIO. I don't do this. I don't do that during talks. And that's when I just point to a random person in the audience when I do a talk. I say, you, what's your name? Who? Yes, you. Steve. Steve, I like your watch, Steve. Steve, I'd like to tell you something. Can I buy you a cup of coffee after this? And they're like, yeah, okay. Boom. I mean, I asked, is everyone in this room married to their boss? I mean, there was someone you didn't know, you didn't report to, and you managed to initiate a conversation with them.
right.
If you're thinking about the problems and you think you have answers and you need some support to do them, then engage those people. Pay them a compliment, buy them a cup of coffee, and then propose your solution. Educate
Well,
yourself about what they care about a little bit first, but just reach out and touch those people, because otherwise a lot of people use the excuse of, oh, I just don't report to the right place, so I can't do anything. It's just not true.
you can be an influencer at any level of the organization, and you can always improve your communicative abilities. I know one of the most important things I think I did in information security on that realm was to join Toastmasters. You're familiar with Toastmasters, right?
I am familiar with
Now, now
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, of course, it's considered a speaking organization, but what I really learned from there was more about how to listen. And also when I did talk, that I would tend to be a little bit more exact. One of my favorite parts of Toastmasters was tabletop exercises, where you were given a topic and you had 2 to 3 minutes to just say whatever. But I think that security folks need to understand that, yes, they can get outside of their comfort zone of what they are experts at and be effective communicating, even if you don't have that direct line of communication to
Yeah.
the well. Oh, you mentioned speaking, so
Yeah.
I wanted to pivot on that. So what do you speak on nowadays?
Um, I speak on mostly about a lot of what we discussed earlier, like what I see are some of the issues with the security industry. Um, this whole we're constantly firefighting more than securing.
Hmm.
We're very focused on the technology, but very little on the process. I've lost count of the number of times where I've gone into an organization and you go talk to the CISO or head of information security, and you ask them, well, what's your sales process? Because this is where your salespeople, they got information from marketing, which they collected from various sources, and they go out, they initiate conversations with people, you get deals, you talk about your products, your development cycles, a lot of sensitive information. Then you sign a deal. Then now you have contractual info, legal info, personal info, financial info. Where is it going? Who's handling it? A lot of really critical stuff. And the security people, no, we've never thought of that or looked at that. It's like, but you've been here almost 10 years, and you don't know how a lot of the most sensitive, important, certainly for your bosses, business processes operate. So I think that's part of it, just that kind of being more business led rather than technology risk led. And the whole looking at things, I think the quality thing is a thing I've termed more recently, but just going as far upstream as possible, and trying to get that engagement. Also how to build programs to achieve this, which is a few hour session on itself. And in some ways, I've almost given up a little bit. I call it the 0.1%, because that's the probably pessimistic percentage of organizations that I feel are actually willing to do and want to really do security proactively. And now I work with a lot of vendors, and I don't want to say shocked, but really not surprised, in fact, of the number of I know some great solutions, and they give a lot of visibility. And specifically, like CISOs don't want those solutions because they know what it's going to show, and they don't want to be accountable for it. And it's a real shame.
Yeah, that is.
So now I finish, please.
No, I was going to say that's a whole soapbox thing for me, where it's like you should be. We had an instance where we were running a tabletop exercise for one group, and it was only the IT folks that were there. I said that we wanted to have the whole organization there, and we start running through it, and they ended up stopping it because they said, "We know where our vulnerabilities are. We just don't want management to know about it." And I'm like, I have failed.
Yeah, it's very sad. And like how, when your CISO is the one blocking visibility to your security issues.
I just, yeah, it was disheartening. But again,
Yeah.
I think that one of the most important, from what I gather from what you say too, is that one of the more overlooked things that a CISO or anybody in security, well, one of the things that they will overlook more often than not is it's so important to know the business, understand the business, not just understand the information and where it flows, but the why behind the business as well.
Yeah.
Well,
a poorly defined role, and unfortunately, it's not what the people who are hiring a CISO, which I really feel should be the executive, should understand that there's a strategic business role that needs to understand and be involved in the business. And a lot of CISOs complain that they don't have that, but the reality is, would you really want it, and what would you do if you had that authority?
Well, and to your point, it's misnamed because just about every CISO out there is a chief of nothing. They're not reporting to the CEO.
Yeah.
And the further down, I mean, that you are a CISO in name only, you don't have that authority, and then you don't have that responsibility as well either. But to your point, it's like, do you really want that? So be careful what you ask for, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I love how we'll work alongside with responsible for information security. We'll work alongside so and so. It's like, no, if I'm responsible, I'm in charge of it.
Well, with all of this, information security, cybersecurity, and certainly I'm also fully aware that speaking in and of itself can sometimes be stressful. Sometimes speaking is a good outlet as well too. But I think it's important for folks to understand that they need to sometimes step away from cybersecurity and just reload, decompress. What's one thing that you do to help reload and decompress?
And the more you know me, the more you realize all my analogies are car analogies, because I am a massive, what in the UK we call petrol head. All my time is spent tinkering cars, talking about cars. 99% of my friends I know through car groups. Vacations are European road trips in cars. It's all cars. Yeah, kind of a lifelong passion, and just either driving to clear your head or tinkering and getting really focused in on something, and you can't think of anything else, and you actually build it. I think it's one thing with security is it's kind of it's cyber, it's virtual. You don't actually build something in your hand. So if you go to a beautiful place or you fix something and you're taking something apart in your hand, it's more fulfilling somehow.
It's kind of interesting because this rarely happens, but earlier this month we had someone on, Carlota Sage, who also is like very much into car tinkering. She was talking about putting in a new engine in a Mazda RX-7 or something or another, and brake lines and this and that. And there's a lot of information security analogies with that as well too. So not only do we have multiple Gregs, but we have multiple hobbies this month. So that's just a bonus.
I know Carlota. I didn't know she was a petrolhead though.
Ah, okay, very good. So you guys have probably already talked about cars in the past.
I don't know, but I know, I'm not actually connected to her, but I'm sure I've spoken to her before. Yes, I recognize her face as well.
Well, then y'all need to get together and talk cars.
I'll reconnect. Thank you for that.
So outside of getting another LinkedIn connection there and talking about cars, any other future plans that you have? Like, for example, what's on the speaking agenda?
So a lot of I got sidetracked before. So what I'm focusing on now is some of the things that motivate me in the industry is just how bad things are and wanting to make a difference. I realized one of the a lot of people in IT and security, you go in, you point stuff out, They're not very receptive. When you do talk about business and a strategic approach to things, it sounds strange to them. They're not familiar with it. And when you do highlight things, they do feel a bit threatened. But what I realized is that I was getting two kinds of, when I was doing like VCSO type work, I was getting two kinds of engagements. The first one just wanted me to write a bunch of policies so they could pass their audit without actually doing any of the work. And the second wanted to just randomly implement some silver bullet solution. And I prefer working, I don't like working for either, but I prefer the second one, because the second one actually believed that what they were putting in was going to help them. Whereas the first one know that writing a policy and sticking in a drawer isn't going to do anything. And the second one was also like they believed in it enough to actually be spending money on it.
Right.
And that led me to vendors. I was like, vendors, like they sell their point solutions, but what if I go and talk to vendors and help them create some more strategic narratives that they can then pass on to the head of InfoSec who hadn't thought about using his vulnerability management tool that year or that way, or didn't realize he could get extra value or see additional things or fix all these problems that are weighing him down by instead fixing that one thing. So to help vendors be seen as more valuable and help them sell, but also by educating and providing a lot of value to the CISOs that they sell to. And that allows me to, through the vendors, help more people and also help the vendors sell a little bit and actually make some money and a living off of it, which is nice. So that's kind of the direction I'm going in now, which I never would have thought, because if you go back 5-6 years ago, I was like so fed up with vendors, screw vendors. We don't need more tools. That's not our biggest problem. Whereas now they've kind of become the solution, or at least the select vendors, as I call them, who want to build relationships with their customers, want to invest in helping maybe educate their customers, become better CISOs and deliver better strategies and support those strategies. So that's kind of where I'm at. So if you are a vendor and you'd like some help selling your product with some narratives and do some good in this industry, please be in touch. Yeah.
Well, how can they get in touch with you? Since
you can find me on LinkedIn, or there's actually a website, gregvandergaast.com. Would you believe that domain name was available?
Oh, that's awesome. I think I tried to get gregschafer.com. I got gregschafer.info, but .com was taken, and I don't know by
Schafer's
who.
going to be a bit more common than Vandergaast. So
it
I
is.
hated my name when I was little. And now because it's unique as a personal brand thing, it's better. So really appreciating it.
There's always a plus side to everything, or just about everything.
You just have to see it.
Well, Greg, we could talk for another hour and a half, but unfortunately, we just don't have the time. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg.
Awesome. Well, everybody, stay secure.